Hi, my name is Justine Wild, and I am the LGBTQ2S+ Subcommittee Chair for District 5360's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I identify as a bisexual woman, and I use the pronouns she and her. So welcome back, or thank you for joining me today. And in today's video, we're going to finish off talking about the LGBTQ2+ acronym by finishing our discussion with queer identities, two-spirit identities, and asexual identities. So let's just hop right into it. First identity we're going to talk about today is queer. So queer is really an umbrella term for anyone who sits on a sexual or gender minority. And that's basically it. So some people might use this as their only identifier, or they might use it in conjunction with another identifier. So queer was originally used to, mean strange or peculiar. And it started being used as an insult towards same-sex couples back in about the late 19th century. And in the 80s, the LGBT community at the time really started to take the meaning of queer back and start using it to describe themselves. And in the 2000s, it started becoming more used as an identifier, a way to sort of describe a broad spectrum of non-normative sexual and gender identities. So that's a little bit about the history of the word, and I do want to quickly touch on how to use queer as a straight ally, because it can be confusing. Like, it's a slur on one hand, but it's also an identifier on the other hand. So it's important to use queer as an adjective rather than like a noun almost. So like if you're describing someone, you would say she is queer rather than she is a queer. And you can use the same for the word gay. She is gay rather than is a gay. So just a little tidbit. But yeah, so let's move on to two-spirit identities. So two-spirit is a very broad term, and it refers to an Indigenous person who identifies as having both a masculine and a feminine spirit. And it's used by Indigenous people or some Indigenous people to describe their sexual, gender, or spiritual identity. So as an umbrella term, it includes both sexual orientation as well as gender variance. So things that we would consider in Western terms: lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or having multiple gender identities. So this term came into existence in the 90s, and it was part of an effort to really reclaim the language and the tradition of Indigenous peoples who were of two-spirit identities. So the goal was to find a word to actually replace a phrase that is used a lot by anthropologists, and that was birdash. It was a very offensive term to use in present day. So the phrase two-spirit was translated from, I believe, an Ojibwe identity that roughly meant two spirits. So it was really a way to, have a more modern, more applicable and less offensive word. So it is widely used, and an important thing to note is that it is an Indigenous identity. So if you're not Indigenous, please don't use it. So I want to talk a little bit about history, just because I do think it is important to our Indigenous community and to our two-spirit community, and that is, when settlers arrived in Canada and the US, they were really confused by two-spirit people and the roles they played, because they didn't fit into the Western binary of gender. So the settlers imposed their gender binary on the Indigenous peoples, and became really a violent tool of colonialism and assimilation into Western European culture and tradition and values. So due to this colonization, two-spirit people's traditions were lost or hidden away. And also as a result, Two-Spirit people started experiencing violence and discrimination not only at the hands of the settlers, but at the hands of their own communities because of internalized homophobia and transphobia. So another important thing, and this can be confusing, but again, as we've talked about before, it's all about respect, listening, and asking questions when we're confused. Two-Spirit is sometimes used as an LGBTQ umbrella term for Indigenous people, but it's important to acknowledge that not all Indigenous people who identify as part of the LGBTQ community call themselves Two-Spirits, or Two-Spirit, or Two-Spirited, and some people who do identify as Two-Spirit don't identify with the LGBTQ community, and that's a very personal decision again. So yeah, so let's move on to our final identity for today, and then if any questions or if I've been going through any comments, so if there is any other identities you want me to cover, we can quickly do it tomorrow as well on our last day or at a later date. So let's talk about asexuality. So asexuality is a lack of sexual attraction to others or a low or absent interest in desire for sexual activity. So a really important distinction to make is that asexuality is different from celibacy and abstention from sexual activity. Those are really behavioral attitudes that derive from religion, social factors, personal beliefs, stuff like that. Asexuality is a sexual orientation. It's not a sexual behavior, so it cannot be changed. It is what we would call enduring. So very much like nothing caused me to become bisexual, nothing causes someone to become asexual. Yeah, so just going through my notes here. So something that's really important to consider as well with asexuality and asexual people is that asexual people can engage in sexual activity. Some people do not, and it is totally 100% a personal call, and really none of our business unless they share it with us, or with you, or what have you. So I do want to end just on the note that it's important to remember that asexuality is not a mental disorder. You know, that, like I said, there's no cause for asexuality. There's no cause for someone being bisexual. There's no cause for someone to be gay. These are sexual orientations. They're with us from birth. Asexuality is not genetic. It's not the cause of trauma, or caused by anything else or anyone else. It is just something that we're born with. I hope that all makes sense. I kind of breezed through this. I will leave tons of resources. Obviously, I don't identify as either Two-Spirit or asexual. So I will leave tons of resources below if you want any further education or any further information. All that will be provided for you. And that's all I have for you today. So join me again tomorrow. We will go over some other important topics such as pronouns, why to give them, why we use them, how to support someone who's coming out, how you can be more inclusive language, all of that good stuff. So I hope you're well, hope you're staying safe, healthy, happy, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.